Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. You know, it's funny. Whenever a new set comes out, I often find myself looking back at older sets to see what tools the designers gave us in advance, either to work with or work against the emerging strategies. And that is just a roundabout way of me saying I really like this guy right now, Sentinel of Lost Lore from Wilds of Eldraine. This is something I would call a pressure valve card, something that the designers of Magic put into Standard to serve as a tool that we can use against certain strategies should they prove to be too oppressive. Strategies like reanimating a track sub or a Tali out of a graveyard. Yep, Sentinel here exiles your opponent's graveyard when he enters the battlefield, and that alone can absolutely ruin a graveyard-based deck. But that doesn't just have to be reanimator stuff. This guy can nab flashback cards like Memory Deluge and stop your control opponent from refilling their hand. You can also just deny your opponent the ability to gather evidence, which is the best evidence I have that Sentinel of Lost Lore was deliberately designed to counterbalance murders at Karlov Manor, at least partially. But to me, a pressure valve card can't just be a reactive card. That would make it more of a sideboard thing, like a pithing needle. No, a valve needs to contribute to your own game plan at the same time, which is why I'm glad to find that Sentinel of Lost Lore works really well with a card called Mosswood Dreadknight. If your Dreadknight dies, normally you can use its Dread Whispers Adventure to replay it, which makes this a very sticky threat, and your opponent is often forced to exile it in order to get rid of it permanently. They might tuck it under ossification or wipe it out with farewell, two of the more popular exile-based removal options in the format right now. But guess what? Sentinel of Lost Lore doesn't care at all, because if you have a card with adventure in exile for any reason, he can move it right back to your hand. Which means it is virtually impossible to get rid of the Dreadknight. So these two together make up the backbone of a new deck that I'm experimenting with on the ranked ladder, and the goal here is not to show you a full final deck list, but to get you thinking about using cards in Standard in fun new ways. Virtue of Persistence works great here because we can use its adventure to kill something, and then Sentinel of Lost Lore moves it back to our hand so we can kill again. And at the same time, our Sentinel answers our opponent's virtues, because if he finds one of theirs in exile, he can just move it to the bottom of their deck, making it really hard for them to fully resolve a Virtue of Loyalty or their own Virtue of Persistence. Again, that is what makes him a good pressure valve card. He interacts with a lot of other strategies out there. Even just being a 3-mana 3/4 body, that is really big. That is a huge speed bump for the aggressive decks out there to overcome. Another fun interaction I'm looking at in my deck is Sword of Forge and Frontier stuck on, Mosswood Dreadknight. You got a 5-power trampler, and when it deals damage to the opponent, it exiles the top 2 cards of your deck. Well, if those have adventures on them, you can use Sentinel of Lost Lore later and move them from exile back to your hand, so you don't have to worry about using them the turn you hit them with the sword. Now, obviously, this works better if we have a critical mass of adventure cards, so I'm also running Gumdrop Poisoner. Her life gain can help us draw some extra cards with our Dreadknights and keep the pressure on our opponent. I've also got a few copies of Stormkeld Vanguard in here just to answer things like Wedding Announcement or other tricky enchantments or artifacts that are giving me a hard time. Now, the deck has black, so you can run whatever removal suite you want, but I'm also trying out a spicy No One Left Behind, because virtually all the good creatures in our deck cost 3 or less, so targeting a Sentinel of Lost Lore might also drag a Dreadknight along, and then you can very easily rebuild after a board wipe. The fact that Sentinel of Lost Lore has so many strong interactions with the various strategies in Standard right now makes him, in my opinion, a great pressure valve card. So that brings us to the question, what's your favorite pressure valve card in Standard right now? Remember, it should be something that advances your own game plan while interacting with a strategy your opponent might be using. Leave me your favorites down in the comments, and then make sure you check out my link for TCG Home, the sponsor of this video. TCG Home is a free web-based application that organizes your card collection with these really handy tags. They also just added price tracking with American prices through Card Kingdom, so you can see the value of your entire collection at a glance. TCG Home is free to use, and signing up does support the show. So check them out and start earning some cool badges for your profile today. Then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.